Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we'll be making this trendy crop top with a belt detail. This will serve as the second piece to the skirt I made in my previous tutorial. So if you haven't seen it, be sure to check it out and let's get started. First, I'll begin by drafting the pattern for this crop top. As you can see, my pattern paper is on a fold. And this folded end will serve as the center front and center back because I'll be cutting the front and back together. These are the tools I'll be needing and here are the measurements for this tutorial, so let's begin. To begin drafting, I'll start by coming down from the top of my pattern paper by 1 inch. I'll mark that point across and then square it out with my ruler, and that will become my shoulder line. And from this line, I'll start marking all my vertical measurements, starting with my shoulder to bust measurement at 11 inches. So I'm coming down from the shoulder line by 11 inches. I'll mark that point across and then square it out with my ruler. And that line will become my bust line, so I'm just indicating that. Next, I'll be marking my shoulder to waist measurement, which is 16 inches. So from the shoulder line, I'm coming down by 16 inches. I'll mark it across, square it out with my ruler, and that line will become my waistline. Now for the full length of the top, I decided to go with 20 inches, but I'll be adding 1 extra inch for hemming allowance. Or you can choose to go lower than that. You can do 18 or 19. This was just a personal preference. So I'm coming down from the shoulder line by 20 inches plus the 1 inch for hemming allowance. I'll be marking that point across and then I'll square it out with my ruler. Now that I'm done marking all these points, I'll be going back to the shoulder line to create my neckline and shoulder slope. I'll begin with the neckline and I'll be creating the front and back neckline on this same pattern. And for the neck width, I'll be using 4 inches. While the neck depth for the back, I'll be going with 1.5 inches. So I'm coming down along the center back by 1.5 inches. And since this folded end serves as a center front and center back, I'll also be coming down by 3 inches and that will serve as a neck depth for the front. So the neck depth for the front is 3 inches and that for the back is 1.5 inches. Now I'll be going in with my French curve to connect these 2 points to meet the neck width at the shoulder line. So there we have the neckline for the back and for the front. Now it's time to create the shoulder slope, and to do that I'll go on to mark half of my across shoulder measurements on the shoulder line. For me, it's 8 inches, so I'll go on to mark that point, and from there, I'll be coming down by 1 inch. I'll mark that as well, and then I'll go in with my ruler to connect that point to meet the neck width in a slant. Next, I'll be creating my upper chest line. So I'm coming up from the bust line by 2 inches. You can also get your upper chest line by dividing your bust circumference by 6 plus 1.5 and then mark the measurement you have downwards from the shoulder slope. For me, it's the same as coming up from the bust line by 2 inches. So I just marked that across. Now I squared it with my ruler and that will be my upper chest line. Now it's time to create my armhole by connecting the shoulder slope to the upper chest line. First, I'll be going in by 8 inches from the folded end along the upper chest line just to make sure it's straight. Then I'll connect that point to meet the shoulder slope in a straight line like so. After which, I'll move on to insert my bust circumference divided by 4 along the upper chest line. For me, that's 10 inches, so I'm just going in from the folded end by 10 inches. And then I'm going to find the midpoint of this vertical line. I'll go on to mark that, and from there, I'll be going in by 3/4 of an inch. And now I'm ready to create my armhole. Now for the armhole, I'll be drawing the front and back together, and the back armhole is pretty straightforward. I'm just connecting the points on the upper chest line to meet the midpoint on that vertical line. While for the front armhole, I'll be connecting the shoulder slope to meet the 3/4 of an inch and then to the upper chest line. And yeah, that's it. We have the armhole for the front and that for the back. So now that I'm done creating the neckline and the armhole, it's time to insert 1/4 of my horizontal measurements. So along the bust line, I'm marking 1/4 of my bust circumference, which is the same thing I marked along the upper chest line. And on the waistline, I'll be marking 1/4 of my waist circumference. While on the last horizontal line, I'll still be marking 1/4 of my waist circumference plus half an inch for ease. Now that I'm done marking all my horizontal measurements, it's time to connect all these points. So I began by connecting the full length to the waistline, and then I decided to add half an inch along the upper chest line for ease, and I went on to connect the waistline to the upper chest line. So now that I'm all done with that, it's time to add my seam allowances. And because this is a free top, I'll be using a 2.5-inch seam allowance along the sides. So I'm just going in and I'm adding all my seam allowances along the horizontal lines. And I'll be stitching down the sides with a 1-inch seam allowance, while the rest will be for ease. And when I'm all done, I'll go on to connect all these points and then proceed to cut it out. So as you can see, I'm cutting starting from the back neckline because I'll be cutting out the back piece first. And along the shoulder slope, I decided to add 1/2 inch allowance to join the shoulders. And then I just continued cutting along the rest of the lines. So here is my pattern, and like I said earlier, I'll be using this pattern to cut out the front and the back. So I've placed my pattern onto fabric and I'll begin by cutting out the back piece first. And along the armhole, I left 1/2 inch that I'll be using to attach the sleeves to the armhole. Once I'm done cutting out the back piece, I'll go back to my pattern paper and cut away the back neckline and the back armhole so I can use this pattern to cut out the front piece. So I've placed my pattern on the fabric and now I'm cutting out the front piece, and I'm still leaving out 1/2 inch that I'll be using to attach the sleeves to the armhole. When I'm done cutting, I'll take out the pattern paper so I can create the cutout detail at the front. And to do that, first I'll be going in by 1/2 inch from the center front along the hemline. Next, I'll be coming up from the hemline by 3 inches. Again, you can choose to do 3.5 or 4 inches. It depends on how open you want it to be. So mine will actually be 2 inches long because I'll be using 1 inch to hem the bottom. So if you want yours longer than that, just increase it. So I'll go ahead and mark 3 inches upwards from the hemline. And then I'll go in with my scissors to cut from one point to the next, like so. And that's it. So when I open it up, this is what it looks like. Like I said, the size of this cutout depends on how wide you want yours to be. So guys, I went on to cut the rest of the pieces that I'll be needing off camera. For the front piece, I cut out 2 facings. I'll be using one to turn the neckline, while the second one will be used for the cutout. For the back piece, I only cut out 1 facing, and that will be used for the back neckline. I also went on to cut out my sleeves. I'll be using a basic sleeve, but you can choose to use whichever sleeve you prefer. And finally, I cut out 2 bands that will be used as a belt. Each band is 5 inches wide and 55 inches long because I wanted a really long belt. So you can decide how wide or long you prefer your belt to be. So now that I've cut out all my pieces, it's time to start stitching. And I'll begin with the bands. I'll be folding each of them towards the wrong side like so. And then I'll go on to stitch one end closed and then stitch all the way to the end. And I'll be doing the same for the other band as well. And I'll also be turning the neckline of the front and back piece as well. To do that, I'll be placing the right side of my facing to the right side of the fabric like so. I'll stitch them together along the neckline, then I'll turn the facing over and create a top stitch on the facing fabric. And I'll be doing the same thing to the front piece as well. So I'm done stitching the bands. I used 1/2 inch allowance to stitch all the way. I also stitched close one end like I said earlier, while the other end is left open. And I'll be using this side to turn the band over to the right side. After turning the bands and giving it a good press, this is what we have. And of course, I already turned the necklines like I said. This is for the back piece, while this is for the front piece. Next, I'm going to be hemming the front and back piece separately. This is so I can attach the bands and also finish the cutout neatly. So I've hemmed both the front and the back pieces, and here's what we have. This is the back piece, while this is the front piece. Now the next thing to do is to attach the band. So I'm going to be placing this open end of the band on the right side of the front piece like so. I'll go ahead to pin it down so it doesn't move, and do the same for the other side as well. And now I'm going to bring in my facing and stitch on top of this, following the cutout shape. And when I'm done stitching, I'll be turning it inwards and making a top stitch on the facing fabric. So I'm using 1/4 inch to stitch following the shape, and then I'll make a top stitch on the facing fabric. So after stitching and giving it a good press, this is what it looks like. I'll advise you use a hemming gum to keep the facing in place so it doesn't come up. So guys, I'm almost done stitching. Now I simply have to join the front and back pieces together along the shoulder. So I'm placing the right side of the back piece to the right side of the front piece like so. I'm going to open up the facing and pin down main fabric to main fabric, facing to facing. And I'll do the same for the other side as well. I'll take this to the machine and stitch them down on a 1/2 inch sewing allowance. I'll also be attaching the sleeves to the armhole, and finally I'll be stitching down the sides using a 1 inch sewing allowance. So guys, after attaching the sleeves and stitching down the sides, this is what it looks like. This is the back and this is the front. This crop top is very simple to make, especially if you're a beginner, because you don't have to go through the hassle of attaching a zipper or creating that. So we've come to the end. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.